One drop of blood. That's all she said she needed. One drop. To run 240 medical tests. To detect cancer, HIV, diabetes, heart disease. To revolutionize healthcare forever. Investors gave her $9 billion. Walgreens signed a deal worth $140 million. The most powerful people in America sat on her board. Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, James Mattis, Rupert Murdoch. There was just one problem. The technology never worked. Not once. Not ever. And she knew it from the beginning. Patients got wrong results. Cancer patients were told they were healthy. Healthy people were told they had HIV. Lives were destroyed by lies, printed on official letterhead. And the woman who built this house of lies, she's not on a yacht. She's not in a mansion. She's in a federal prison in Texas, serving 11 years. This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes was born in 1984 in Washington, D.C. Her family had money and connections. Her father worked at Enron. Yes, that Enron. From childhood, she was obsessed with one thing: being a billionaire. Not making something great, being something great. At 19, she enrolled at Stanford, chemical engineering. But she wasn't there to learn. She was there to network. Within months, she had convinced her professor, Channing Robertson, that she had an idea that would change medicine forever. 2003. At 19 years old, Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford and founded Theranos. Her pitch: a patch you wear on your arm that could diagnose disease and dispense medication automatically. It was pure science fiction. But it sounded incredible. The arm patch idea was abandoned quickly. It was impossible. But Holmes pivoted to something almost as ambitious: a device that could run hundreds of blood tests from a single drop of blood. She called it the Edison. Now here's what you need to understand about blood testing. It's not simple. Different tests require different amounts of blood, different chemical reactions, different equipment. There's a reason traditional labs use vials of blood, not drops. The physics and chemistry don't scale down that easily. But Elizabeth Holmes wasn't a scientist. She was a storyteller. And she was building more than a company. She was building a mythology, starting with herself. She adopted Steve Jobs' signature look, the black turtleneck. She claimed she wore it every single day. She reportedly lowered her voice by a full octave, speaking in an unnaturally deep baritone. This wasn't just fashion. This was manufactured identity. And it worked. In 2004, she raised her first $6 million. In 2006, $9 million more. By 2010, over $90 million. The money was flowing, despite the fact that the technology was failing. Every single test inside Theranos, it was chaos. Engineers were told to build the impossible. When they said it couldn't be done, they were fired. The company went through engineers like tissues. The turnover was insane. But nobody outside knew. The Edison machine itself, it was a disaster. In internal tests, it failed over 60% of the time. But here's what Theranos did instead of fixing it. They cheated. They ran the samples on traditional machines, the same ones every other lab used, then pretended the results came from the Edison. But Elizabeth Holmes didn't slow down. If anything, she accelerated. In 2013, she convinced Walgreens to sign a deal worth up to $140 million. Theranos blood testing centers would be in Walgreens stores across America. Then Safeway. Another $350 million deal. Safeway built clinics inside their stores specifically for Theranos. They were betting their healthcare future on technology that didn't exist. But here's the part that defies belief. Walgreens never tested the technology. They never did proper due diligence. They were so afraid of missing out on the next big thing that they skipped basic verification. Sound familiar? 2014. Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes was worth $4.5 billion, the youngest self-made female billionaire in history, on the cover of every magazine, praised by every outlet. And her board of directors: Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State; George Shultz, former Secretary of State; James Mattis, four-star general who would become Secretary of Defense. These weren't startup advisors. These were the most powerful people in America. Why did they believe her? Because she told them what they wanted to hear, that American innovation could solve healthcare, that a young genius could disrupt an industry, that the next Apple was being built, and they could be part of it. But the technology still didn't work. And now, Theranos was testing real patients, real blood, real diagnoses, real consequences. A woman in Arizona was told she was having a miscarriage. She wasn't. A man was told he had HIV. He didn't. Another patient was told she didn't have cancer. She did. And lost precious time for treatment. These weren't glitches. They were crimes. Meanwhile, inside Theranos, the person who knew everything was Sunny Balwani, Elizabeth Holmes's secret boyfriend. He was COO. He was also a bully who terrorized employees, threatened lawsuits, and helped cover up the fraud. Employees who raised concerns were threatened, silenced, fired. The culture was fear. One employee was told that Theranos would pursue him to the ends of the earth if he talked, but someone did talk. Tyler Schultz, 22 years old, grandson of board member George Schultz. He saw the fraud from inside and decided to do something insane. He contacted a journalist at the Wall Street Journal named John Carreyrou. What happened next was incredible. George Schultz, Tyler's own grandfather, tried to stop him. Theranos sent lawyers to his house. His grandfather brought them into THE family home to pressure Tyler to stay silent. Family chose company over truth. But Tyler Schultz held firm. He hired his own lawyers, spent his own money, and John Carreyrou kept investigating. For months, then years, piecing together the truth that Theranos had buried. The 15th of October 2015, the Wall Street Journal published the story. The headline: Hot startup Theranos has struggled with its blood test technology. The empire of lies began to crack. Elizabeth Holmes went on the offensive. She called the reporting inaccurate. She gave interviews. She threatened to sue. She used her board connections to pressure the journal. For a moment, it seemed like she might survive. But the evidence was overwhelming. More sources came forward. The FDA investigated. CMS, the agency that oversees medical labs, investigated, and what they found was worse than anyone imagined. CMS inspected the lab and found it posed immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. The Edison machines were wildly inaccurate. Quality control was non-existent. Theranos was banned from blood testing for 2 years. Walgreens terminated the partnership. Safeway walked away, having wasted $350 million. The board members started resigning. The rats were leaving the ship. In June 2018, Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani were indicted on federal charges. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud. They had lied to investors, doctors, and patients. For years. For billions. The trial took years. COVID delayed it. But in January 2022, the jury delivered its verdict. Elizabeth Holmes, guilty, 4 counts of fraud against investors. She was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. Sunny Balwani got even more, 12 years. Both are currently in federal prison. The voice that was lowered to command respect now has a prisoner number attached to it. The damage? Immense. $9 billion in investor money gone. Patients who received wrong diagnoses. Employees whose careers were destroyed. A healthcare system that trusted a con artist. But unlike WeWork, this story has something different. Consequences. Elizabeth Holmes is in prison. Sunny Balwani is in prison. Tyler Schultz is vindicated. Sometimes. The system works. So what are the lessons? First, credentials are not the same as competence. Elizabeth Holmes had Stanford. She had famous board members. She had none of the scientific ability to build what she promised. Second, due diligence isn't optional. Walgreens, Safeway, billion-dollar investors. None of them properly tested the technology. They trusted the story because questioning it felt rude or slow. Third, whistleblowers are essential. Without Tyler Schultz risking everything, patients might still be getting wrong diagnoses today. The system needs people willing to speak up, even when it costs them. And fourth, when medicine meets Silicon Valley hype, be terrified. Moving fast and breaking things is fine for apps. It's not fine for blood tests that determine cancer treatment. Elizabeth Holmes promised to change the world with a single drop of blood. Instead, She changed her prison address. She changed the lives of patients who trusted her lies. She changed the meaning of fake it till you make it into fake it till you're indicted. One drop of blood. $9 billion. Hundreds of wrong diagnoses. 11 years in prison. The biggest fraud in Silicon Valley history. Finally got what it deserved. But here's the question that should keep you up at night. How many other Theranos E's are out there right now? How many companies have impressive founders, famous boards, billions in funding, and technology that doesn't work? We like to think Theranos was unique, an aberration. But the incentives that created Theranos haven't changed. The desperation to fund the next unicorn, the fear of missing out, the worship of founder mythology. The only thing that stopped Theranos was journalism. Whistleblowers, people willing to ask uncomfortable questions when everyone else was celebrating. That's the immune system of capitalism. And it almost failed. One drop of blood. That's all it takes to change someone's life. For better. Or for worse. Elizabeth Holmes proved that, just not in the way she promised. This was the downfall, where every empire falls. And we show you exactly how it happens. If this story made you think about who you trust and why, subscribe. Because the next fraud is already raising its Series A. Downfall. Subscribe now.